Welcome back to Inside Voices, a teacher podcast by teachers for teachers, where we discuss all things education. I'm your host, Laura.
And I'm David.
And remember that in here, we use our inside voices. Welcome back to Inside Voices. On this week's episode, we are going to be talking all about our favourite subject, ourselves. No, honestly, I am kidding about that. I don't love to talk about myself, but we are actually going to talk about our teaching journeys and how we got to where we are now. I promise we've not just decided to do this. We have actually been requested to do this episode a good amount of times. We've just never thought people would be that interested. So if you are listening to this one, strap in, because
Okay.
it might be a bit of silly goose time, but you know what?
Okay.
That's what it's for. So starting us off, we thought we'd just chat a little bit about our roots into teaching, because we both have kind of different journeys into the teaching world. So David, kick us off. Tell us a little bit about your journey into teaching. How did you get to this point?
Okay, I never wanted to become a teacher. In fact, I actually was quite against becoming a teacher because my sister was one and my mum was one, and all we heard in the house was teacher chat, and it wasn't something that interested me. But simultaneously, I was doing a lot of youth work. I've said this before, like through church, camps, that kind of thing. And I actually left school at 17. I got my hires, I got my results that I needed in 5th year, and didn't want to do 6th year. Worst decision I've probably ever made. Didn't want to do 6th year. Left when I was 17, just turned 17 actually, only a month before leaving. And I went to university at Glasgow, stayed at home, and I did 2 years of accountancy and finance, which I hated. And not to get like...
It's not for him.
No, not to get deep or anything, but probably would never have finished the course, but would have stuck it out for another year, possibly, if it hadn't been for my dad. So I don't think he even really probably remembers this or knows this, and he always listens to the episodes anyway, so he'll hear it. But if it wasn't for him, I would have really struggled in 3rd year. So I did 1st year, failed a couple of exams, got through. 2nd year, did the same. And it was because I wasn't going in, I wasn't loving it. I liked the people, I didn't enjoy the course, and I didn't really know what was going on either. I didn't have the background knowledge. I didn't do accountancy at school. I was quite good at maths, but once I hit university,
it's a different type of maths,
wanted to play pool and go to the gym, and I just like totally flunked it, to be honest.
There's not a degree in pool and gym.
No, and I just wasn't interested. For some reason, I thought university was just mucking about, but actually you had to work quite hard. I know that sounds so silly, but I was 17 and really young. So I remember actually I was sitting in my bed one day. I should have been at a lecture, sitting in my bed, and my dad came into my room and said something along the lines, I can't remember word for word, but he said something along the lines of, you need to quit, like you need to do something else. And we hadn't even discussed it at this point.
Yeah. We
hadn't even mentioned anything like that. I'd just always been like, oh yeah, it's fine, I'll get through these exams, I'll fail a couple, I always do, ha ha ha. He said, you need to change. And he also said, which any parents listening, this is a big advice, he made it very clear that there was going to be no judgment there.
Yeah.
And any financial burden that was going to come from that, because I'd done 2 years. So in Scotland, if you do 1 year, you can quit after 1 year and still get free tuition for a full degree. But if you do 2 years, you basically only get your course length +1. And I had done +2. So he said, listen, there's not going to be any financial repercussions on you. We will support you. Your mum and I will support you through whatever decision you make, but you need to make a decision. And that was like a huge burden off my shoulders at whatever I was, 18, 19. Because for me, it was like, no, you have to stick this course out. You have to get this because you've started it and you've made this decision, and it would be mortifying if you quit, that kind of thing. So anyway, we had a discussion about what my strengths were. I actually got a place for law in Aberdeen because I just applied to a bunch of different stuff, and I got a couple of places for teaching. Never had to do a proper interview or anything. Kind of got in off the skin of my teeth, and went and spoke to a woman because I was already in the School of Social Sciences, which was, I was in the business school. I was in the business school because of accountancy and finance, so I couldn't transfer just to like 2nd year of teaching, which was annoying. So I had to go back to 1st year. So I did 6 years of university. Ooh. I know. And do you know the only reason I didn't want to become an architect? Because you have to do 7 years of uni. Or a doctor or something, because you have to do 7 years of uni, and I did 6 anyway. So I went and transferred within. I didn't take the place in Aberdeen. I went and transferred within, and that went smoothly. And I actually started to love it, met some good friends who I'm still friends with, and yeah, started to really take university seriously. Did my 4 years, no hiccups in terms of placements, loved all the placements that I was in, got good schools, really good mentors the whole way through, and I actually ended up going back on my probation year to the school I was in my 3rd year placement. That's kind of the route that I've taken to teaching. It's not the normal route, but I don't know many people that have taken the normal route.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's journey, if you will, that sounds so cheesy, but everyone's way into teaching is really different. So obviously
totally. And
I always get asked if you can compare the 4-year course to the PGDE, and obviously I've done the PGDE, so a completely different route to you. So it would be
PGCE
or PGCE if you're in England. It's kind of hard to compare them, I would say, because I've only got experience of one. Sometimes I get asked if I felt unprepared for my probation year and my PGDE. Yeah. In all honesty, I think whichever course you do, you feel unprepared 100%. Because you go from being, not that you're not supported, of course you are, but you go from being kind of watched every day. Even when you're in charge, you are still watched every day, because ultimately that teacher is responsible for the class. So they need to know, what did you teach? How did the kids get on for every single lesson? You're on your own. Obviously not.
Good luck.
You don't have total autonomy because you need to still report to head teachers, mentors, etc. You still get observed.
But it's still day one.
But the amount of autonomy you get from your student teaching years is crazy. And it's really hard to make that shift at first. I think it was really difficult when I first went in, and one thing I found really hard was, when do I move on from a topic? Like if I'm doing place value, do I just decide, hey, they've got it, and I'm like, I'm 20 years old. How am I supposed to, I'm a 20-year-old teenager. I don't know how to deal with these things, you know? Like, I was so young when I think about it. Like, it's wild that I was in charge of a whole class.
Were you 20 when you graduated?
Education. I was or like just 21. And then I also made the mistake of, I was really nervous on my first few days, and they asked how old I was in the staff room. And for some reason, I said like 24, right? And I couldn't ever admit for like years after that I was not actually 3-4 years older than I said. And then someone saw like my mum's birthday post or something. It was like, happy 23rd birthday. And they were all like, huh? I thought you were like 24 years old. And I'm like, no. I was
usually people do it the other way.
I was 21. I don't know why I said that, but I just couldn't go back. And here we are. Anyway, totally sidetracked. But as I said, I did the postgraduate.
Did you always
route.
Want to be a teacher?
In all honesty, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was 17. I wasn't even really going to bother with uni. I was just so disinterested in school and education in general. I just was kind of done. And I don't know what that was. Like, I probably shouldn't have stayed for 6th year because I didn't need to. I just felt like I stayed because it's what everybody did. Yeah. And I didn't hate school. I just was kind of like past sitting there day after day doing the same stuff, you know, the classic. I just wasn't really invested in it, and I felt like I was surrounded by people who knew what they wanted to do.
100%.
But my school was very much, everyone knew what they wanted to do from when they were like 13 years old. We went to, I think, very similar schools. So I went to school in a completely different city. I went to school in Dundee, but the school I was at had a good reputation for being a school that got good results, and the people who were in 6th year all were like really good at something and knew exactly what they wanted to do. And I never felt like I was really, really good at something. You know, I felt like
she's an average gal.
I guess. I did well in my exams. I did well in everything I tried, but I never felt like I was, you know, the person's going to get the best score in maths or the person who's going to get the best score in English. I was just like, I could do this and that's fine, but I don't feel like I am particularly good at something. Whereas you're sitting with people who are going, I'm going to be a doctor, and they're 13 years old, and I'm like, huh? Yeah. I just want to like go home and log onto my laptop and play on Paint. Like, I don't know what I want to do. You know, so that puts a lot of pressure on. That puts a lot of pressure onto you, and I feel like I kind of desensitized to it a little bit. That by the time I got to 17, I was like, these people all have their lives together, know exactly what they want to do. Have half of them gone on to actually do those things? Probably not, because you change your mind so many times. But I had no idea, and I just struggled coming to terms with the fact I've got no idea. And I remember my one of my teachers he was like modern studies teacher, so he did sociology and modern studies and everything. Very strict guy. Once left me outside my classroom for a whole double period and didn't speak to me once because I sat down and went, I forgot to do my I didn't even get to finish the sentence. I stood there. He went to the photocopier. He went to the toilet. He walked by me in the corridor and truly didn't even look at me.
Savage.
I was just like done with the day. And I'm like, do you know what? As a teacher now, I probably pushed your buttons at the wrong time by just saying I didn't do my homework.
Yeah.
But he was a great teacher. Like, despite being that really strict, I loved being in his class. He was great. And he sat me down and he was like, I just was like, I don't know what I want to do, because we're talking about writing personal statements. Everyone was talking about it, and I was sat there like, get me out of here. Can't be bothered. And he's like, just do something you like. Like, just go do something you enjoy. So you're 17, you know, you've got time. You don't need to have your life together right now. It might 100%. Seem like you do, but you don't. And I went on to apply for, I was going to do psychology, and it was him who said,
Classic.
you're not gonna like that. And I said, what do you mean I'm not gonna like it? And he was like, you know, psychology is probably not what you're thinking it is. It's a lot of like maths and science and all of that, and I don't think you're gonna like it. So he suggested going on to do politics and sociology. Glad I listened to him, because that's what I decided. Do you know, I'm going to take that advice. Go do something that I like. I kind of thought I wanted to be a teacher, and I threw a primary school teacher application in with the politics and sociology. But obviously my personal statement wasn't written for that. So they were kind of did you mean to do this? Was this a mistake?
Yeah.
Ended up accepting a place to do politics and sociology, and did love it. I actually found it really, really interesting. Yeah. I transferred unis over to one of the ones in the West Coast after a year so I could move here. But it was genuinely interesting, and I found it was something I was good at.
Right.
Don't know if it's just because I can waffle pretty well.
Yeah.
I can come up with an answer pretty quickly, but I think probably second year I decided, no, maybe you do want to go and be a teacher. And that's when I kind of looked into the options of how to go and become a teacher. I applied in third year for my postgrad, not really expecting to get in. I just spoken to people who said,
high competition.
Yeah, it's really competitive. It can take a good few years to get in. So in my head, I was thinking, look, I was working full time at the time as well. So if I can work, I mean, it wasn't a full time contract during the uni year, but I ended up making it up to be that anyway. Yeah. If I can work 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week, and do that once I finish my dissertation, still just do that for a year or so till I get in, that's fine. I'm cool with that. And then I ended up getting in my third year, so I didn't have to do my honours year, which was quite nice because I didn't have to do a dissertation.
Wait, why didn't I know this?
I don't know, but
maybe I did.
I didn't have to do an honours year, so I don't know how I did that. Actually.
Wait, we've spoken about this before, because I didn't have to do a dissertation either.
Yeah, I don't know how I got away with that one, but you know, ended up getting in anyway.
Yeah.
And obviously the postgrad year goes so fast. 3 placements for me, 3 6-week long placements. First 2, great. Third one, probably cried every single night, but nice. Survived to tell the tale, you know.
Exactly. That's a good lesson, actually, because so many people message us on Instagram and TikTok and say, I've got my placement, I'm hating it, what do I do?
Yeah.
Sometimes, not all the time, because sometimes you can change it and sometimes you can fix it. Sometimes you got to get through it.
Yeah.
You know? And you just got to see that this is not because of me, it's because of other things or whatever.
Don't get me wrong, my placement wasn't as bad as I've heard some people's be. I just felt like it was a lot of chipping at you till you break. Yeah. And I was like, I'm not breaking. Like, your girl holds a grudge, right? She is like, no, you push me, I'm going to just, She's not showing any sort of, so, but I just felt like it was constantly like trying to get, you know,
little low level stuff.
Like just little things. Like I had gone from, in my first 2 placements, so in Dundee Uni you were graded as like unsatisfactory, satisfactory, good, excellent on like 10 criteria. So my first 2 placements I'd gone from like excellent and very good or whatever it was to satisfactory. Yeah. And that bugged the living daylights out of me. Yeah.
Even though you were still passing.
Yeah. One of them was because I spelt a word wrong in one slide.
Terrible.
In one slide. Bear in mind, I'd made this slide at like midnight 4 nights before, because that's just what happens sometimes. Yeah. Should I have spell checked? Probably. But as a teacher now, I make spell mistakes on the board and the kids just go, that's not spelled right. I'm like, oh, whoopsies. And then we fix it. Because who actually cares that much if you spell a word wrong? Genuinely, the kids don't. Yeah. So it was little things like that just, and then it was an 1.5-hour drive for me to that placement, an 1.5 hours home. I remember one night I used
6 weeks.
Yeah, I had to leave at 7 a.m. So I was leaving at 7. Probably before that some days, actually, 6:30 some days. And I got home at 10 o'clock at night because there was a parent council meeting.
Oh, right.
And I was encouraged to stay for this. Ooh. I don't actually really know why, because
What?
I've never been to a parent council meeting
No?
since. Anyway, besides the point, I was asked to stay for this, and I'm thinking, I can't go home. So I had to just stay, and everybody else lived nearby, so they went home and then came back.
Yep.
And I got home at 10 o'clock, and I remember walking in, my mum's staring at me like, are you all right?
What job are you doing?
I'm not all right. I need to go to my bed. Like, this is not fun. But said, I think if I'd had that placement first, it would have totally shifted my
Ruined your
perspective.
confidence.
But because I'd had 2 placements that went really well, I was like, I can't all of a sudden have gone from being all right at this job and people think I could do a good job to being like terrible.
Yeah.
You know, it's not shifted that quickly. But that's important to remember, that teaching is such, what one person sees as good is not going to be what other people see as good.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of take things with a bit of a pinch of salt and know where your strengths lie. That doesn't mean you sit there and say, I'm great at everything, I never need to change, I never need to learn. Like, you don't have to have that attitude. No one's going to be on the same page with you if you have that attitude.
Yeah.
But you do also have to take things with a pinch of salt of saying, I do that but in a different way, or, you know, maybe that's not how my classroom's going to operate. It's not how my classroom's going to benefit if I do those things. Works for others, doesn't work for you. That's fine. That's okay. You don't need to worry about it.
I said I had a funny story to go back to, right?
And then she talked for 20 minutes.
Yeah. I'm like trying to remember what it was. Oh, it was years ago. No, I can't remember what the context you were speaking about, but I think it was applying for university. So when I applied, obviously I was 17 and in 5th year, and you usually do that stuff in 6th year. You know, your UCAS,
like your personal statement.
Yeah, your UCAS, your personal statement, all that
I would love to
stuff.
read my personal statement from when I was 17.
I don't even want to think about what's on mine. But anyway, so I didn't really know what I was doing. Okay,
this is the tale of this. No one ever really knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I know. I applied to university and thought, right, I want to do accountancy, so I'm going to apply for accountancy. Didn't know that when you apply for like your bachelor's, you have to do it in the school. So bachelor's of finance or bachelor's of business or whatever it is, or bachelor of, you know, social studies if it was teachers,
fair,
that kind of thing. Like, no one had explained that to me. So I just clicked the first one. Do you want to know what it was? I fully applied and got funding for this. I had to reapply and ask them. My dad was howling. We still talk about it sometimes. I applied for a bachelor's of divinity. I was going to become a reverend.
Oops.
By accident.
Talking about accountancy in your personal statement. They're like, I don't think you've got this.
It came through and my dad was like, why are you applying to be like a reverend? I was like, I don't know.
I didn't mean that.
I didn't know there was like differences.
Oh,
I didn't realise there was a drop down menu. So yeah, I applied to be a minister.
You did not scroll down to all the options.
It should have been the first sign that maybe going to university at 17 wasn't for me.
A wise choice.
Yeah, I didn't really know how to operate in this life.
A drop down box.
Yeah. But
he's actually born in the 1901 because he doesn't know how to change it.
Yeah. But there's lots of things like that happen along the way, and it's a bumpy road to get. What I mentioned at the end of what I was saying was, not many people have a normal route into teaching. So the people I was at university with, quite a few of them don't teach now.
Yeah.
But they've done that degree, so they've done different things with the degree.
It's so many transferable skills though.
Yeah, and what I think the issue, you go into teaching to be a teacher, but what a lot of people don't realise is actually your degree can open up different avenues for you, and you don't just have to be a teacher.
No, because within education you've got learning and development roles in corporate positions, you've got trainer roles. There's a lot of things that you learn in teaching, but also for the postgraduate you kind of get the flip side of that. You get a lot of people who've come from, actually I saw a video the other day, it was somebody on a podcast who was talking about how teachers have no professional experience, but they're teaching. When you're thinking about teachers and people in education, this kind of, you're telling me how to be an accountant, for example, but you don't have any accountancy experience in the real kind of professional industry. Yep. But actually I would argue with the postgrad, you've got people who've got a lot of professional experience,
so it's different in high school.
And a lot of different jobs.
Yep.
So actually when you're talking about that, is that true the whole way through? I wouldn't say so. It doesn't make you any less of a teacher to not have that professional background. But a lot of people who came into the postgraduate where people come into like a second career who have maybe gone out and got all this experience doing other things and then come back and said, I'd quite like to go and be a teacher. And a lot of the time when you speak to these people, they also say teaching was harder than some of these other jobs they've been in. They've been in some real tough corporate situations and then come back in and said, teaching is really difficult.
Yeah, it's quite eye-opening when they do that, actually.
Yeah, I think it's because it's one of those closed professions you don't see a lot of. And obviously that's why it's kind of a jump scare for people when they see that there's a teacher on TikTok or there's a teacher on a podcast. People are like, whoa, this isn't what we're used to. But it is that closed profession where you don't actually see what teaching is like. If you're not a teacher who's in a school for, I would say, at least a year, say if you want to sit down and know what school's like, go and sit with the same class every day for a year and just watch. You know, like those programs where you're behind a mirror but it's actually a screen and you can watch. Go and observe and see what it's actually like for every second of the day, what a teacher has to deal with, and watch it. Because I could guarantee it would change people's perspective of what it's actually like. Yeah,
100%. Obviously we made it into schools. We got jobs kind of moving us on from university. So through COVID, we've spoken about this before, but through COVID, we were teaching in our probation year, different schools. 2019 into 2020, our probation year was cut short by COVID by about like 2 days. So we had to make that up. Or we got away with it basically, which was touch and go. And then we applied for jobs in the February and the lockdown hit, in March. So that was touch and go as well. And we just got our offer of a job like a couple of weeks before lockdown hit. So quite fortunate in the way that it landed for us. This is really interesting to people in England because they do not get this system. And we were talking to people down in London about this. The way we got a job was... It's just baffling to people that have never heard this before. The way we got a job was we applied to the council and the contract that we got, this isn't every council, but this is the way that it works for us. The contract that we got was what's called a permanent supply, and you get that for like 2 or 3 years. And the permanent supply post is an interesting one because what they do is they can put you in a school. They can put you in a school. There's a burp into the mic. They can put you in a school and whenever they want, they can move you from that school to another school that needs it within the council. That's really unsettling for teachers. I found it quite unsettling.
Yeah, especially if you're in a position where
for you because you were already in that school.
Yeah, you don't know if you're going to stay there. You know, whereas I had conversations, so I kind of knew I was.
Yeah, you've given that assurance. Exactly. But I had kind of been pulled from the school I was in for my probation year. There was no space in it, and put into the school that you were in, which was very fortunate the way it worked out. It worked out well, but for others that doesn't happen. A lot of them just get moved from pillar to post. And after 2 years in that school, we then got permanent contracts to that school. So that was so satisfying because then I could get a mortgage, and I could already get a mortgage, but it was just more like I can move into this
where you were,
area. Yeah, exactly. And I know where the school is that I'm going to be. I'm not going to be at the other side of the council every day, which is quite a large area. And it was just much more settling for me knowing that this is where I'm coming every single day. It's also 2 minutes down the road.
He can go home for lunch.
I can go home for lunch and I pass a Greg's on the way there, which is just dangerous. But yeah, that process is so foreign to people in other countries because it's not something that really gets done. Yeah,
and I think one of the things that I always find really interesting about England is to get your job in England, most of the time they ask for you to model a lesson. And actually, we don't do that. I think that would put me at ease. As difficult as that would be, going in and teaching a lesson with students you don't know, I always think like I can show you what I can do better than I can tell you what I can do. Yeah, some people really struggle with that interview process. The flip side of people who can talk a really good talk, but then when it comes to actually teaching, it maybe isn't matching up. Whereas everyone listening to this is thinking of someone right now. I know they are. You're thinking of someone. I feel like I'm the opposite. Like I can't, in an interview, I kind of freeze up and I'm like, you know, you're at it. You do not freeze up. But then you go out and you go, I should have said this. I should have said that. I should have said this. Yeah, you know, you can tell people what you've done, but you forget how you've done it. Whereas when you go and model a lesson, I feel like it becomes sort of second nature, and you can kind of go and actually show people what you can do. I think it's also when you're being observed by people you know, it's really hard. Like if true. Not so much you, but if someone comes and observes me and I know them, I'm always get like that. It's like that fear, you know, when your mum and dad would come and watch you in a school show and I'm like, oh no, not them. Like give me strangers any day and that's fine. I don't care because I don't really care what strangers think of me, but I can't do it in front of people I know. So if you're doing this lesson, I feel like it kind of gives you a chance to either redeem yourself or match up what you're saying, prove what you're saying. You're right. I think that would be a good thing to
It's
do in
also
Scotland.
some people's worst nightmare, though.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't fit with the system we have, but it would, in my opinion, be quite a good thing to do. I don't know.
It really fell down during COVID, didn't it? Because people had to do like online live lessons for their interview.
I know.
Mortifying. Imagine, like, that would just be my worst nightmare, to be honest.
Yeah, online lessons were a wild time.
Totally.
It's time for Listener Voices, where we hear from you, our listeners. So we reached out on TikTok about some questions that people had for us. You know, we tend to get these questions quite a lot, and we figured if we answer them in a podcast, you can come and listen to it if you want to know the answer rather than answering it all the time. So one of the questions was about deciding. It was actually from someone that we met down at Bet. She's amazing. Mrs. is it RSHPE teacher? An RE teacher.
Mum life.
Yes, she's amazing. She's great, but she's
our new best friend.
She actually said, "Do you wish you were secondary school teacher so that you could work with me?" Obviously, of course.
No.
But one thing we always get asked is, how did you decide between secondary and primary?
Ooh, that one was easy for me because I'm 5'8" and could literally get blown over by a gust of wind. So I don't think high school would really be my forte. All the experience I'd had beforehand was with working with younger children. Youth clubs, camps, that kind of thing. And high school just kind of freaks me out. I would also have to be an expert in a subject, which I'm not. So I would have had to have done a degree previously, whereas you could have made that choice. I didn't have that option.
Yeah, I mean, I did consider it, but then I also considered I take things really personally.
Yeah, that'd be hilarious.
So I'm just going to put this out there. If you've ever commented anything mean on my TikTok
she thinks about
or anything remotely mean, I do think about it for a week solid, and you've probably made me cry.
Yeah.
There's certain things, little snippets of joy you get being a primary school teacher, like, you know.
Yes,
one of them, they made like, they had red paint and they'd put their red hands in. They'd made it a poster saying "Bad Blood" by Taylor Swift, and it was so cute. And I got like 4 of the same poster today, but I love them all because they're slightly different.
Random.
And I know, but like little things like
I thought it was
that.
going to be like, you're the best teacher.
I love when they find like a rock. It's because they know I like Taylor Swift, and I'm like, that's really cute. When they find like a rock outside, they're like, "I got this rock because it makes me think of you, and it's for you." And I'm like, "Thank you."
One time in class,
I love it.
There was a group of girls that brought. It's hilarious because they're all grown up now, but they brought in rocks from outside and they wanted to do show and tell on why they'd found diamonds, and they were so convinced they'd found diamonds, and I let them do it, and the rest of the class made fun of them, and I felt so bad after it. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm never doing anything like that again.
A few years ago, some of my students did that as well. They came in with like rocks and a little lunchbox, like, you know, those little sandwich tubs. And I was like, why do you have rocks in there? And they just turned to me like, honestly, deadpan, looked right at me and went, "They're actually gemstones." And I felt so bad because I felt like I just crushed their world. And I'm like,
no, they're not.
They're definitely rocks. Yeah. But you know what? Sure thing. But also, can we stop picking them up because we're going to have no rocks left outside, and they're all going to be in my classroom. So just
teaching primary does throw up a couple of, just before you move on, teaching primary does throw up a couple of funny things. Like, we've got a garden in school, and they legitimately grow decent veg.
Oh, they come in with like pumpkins, no, like but giant pumpkins.
We sell it at a farmer's market kind of thing. Anyway, I mean, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't have a clue where to start, but the kids are really good at it. I can't even keep a spider plant alive, and apparently they're impossible to kill. Why at the end of the year, when we're cleaning out our tray, do they all have carrots and celery in their tray? And it's like mouldy. I'm like, guys, that is foul.
That's
the fact that you put carrots in. When did we reap them? Like, or harvest them? Like, what, 3 months ago? And there's just mouldy carrots. Anyway, it does
primary
throw up
school
some good.
Does definitely give you those, like, there's a certain joy about working with children that age that just you cannot replicate, because they just come away with some absolute
But then if you speak
crackers.
to a high school teacher, they're like, oh, I could never do primary.
I think it's also maybe not a patience thing, but the kind of,
is it maybe just because primary teachers are better than high school teachers?
Maybe it's just my maturity level that I'm on par with the 7-year-olds that I teach. But anyway, another question, going from that to kind of a serious one. Do you feel like you're well equipped to teach students with additional support needs during your time at uni? Do you feel like...
my time at uni. No, probably not.
I think that depends on what it depends on what you experience, because if you go into to placement schools where there are those additional support needs and you also are demonstrated how to support them well, then but uni can't possibly cover every single, because there's every child's different.
In Scotland with inclusion, you're going to come up against every kind of need in your classroom, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's neurodiverse, like all of the the full range of things that you can come up against.
Then also they might have the same support need, but it's then supported differently. So, you might be faced with, for example, 2 students with ADHD who you support very differently. So I think that's a hard one to say 100%. You're obviously taught about ADHD and autism and
but once you
supporting
put it into
literacy,
practice,
supporting numeracy, there's only so far theory will take you with that.
Because every child's different.
And it's going to come with knowing your children and the experiences that you get. It's not going to be look at your textbook, and find the chapter on. It's not as simple as that. I could see why that would be overwhelming, because especially like you've gone over the kind of inclusion things in Scotland, the policies and such, especially looking at what you're facing in a class. It can be overwhelming to sit there and think, wow, I've got a lot of things I'm going to have to support.
Yeah, definitely.
But you do find your way with it. And sometimes on paper, it looks like it's a lot more than it is, because you just kind of integrate it and get used to it. Another one is, what is the biggest difference that you've noticed between teachers who've done the full 4 years versus those with a PGDE?
Well, the people who have done the full 4 years are obviously much more accomplished in learning and teaching. We've done two and a bit years of like Vygotsky or whatever.
But you've only got one, so that's...
Actually, I've got 1.5.
1.5. Half doesn't
I've
count.
got 2 years of accountancy and
half
finance.
Doesn't count.
Obviously, what did you get in your degree, in your undergrad? Oh, you didn't do honours?
What? Neither did you. No, you did. You just didn't do a dissertation.
Yeah, I just didn't do the
I
masters.
Just got, weirdly...
I got first.
Weirdly,
Sorry,
I have a Bachelor of Arts.
Oh, right.
Because it used to be... I don't know why they changed it from a
BA,
science.
but
it's a social science. Like, it is technically a science.
Yeah.
Mine is a Bachelor of Arts. Don't know where that came from for politics.
Mine, I've got
when I tell people that, they like to
Bachelor
laugh, because obviously...
Actually, listen to this.
Footage of my drawings.
Sorry, listen to this. I've actually got a master's diploma. I'll have you know. Okay. I know you're about to get a master's. I actually have credits towards a master's.
A fully grown master's, but okay.
What was the question?
Anyway, that wasn't the question. The question was about the biggest differences. I mean, I can speak to this more as having students.
Not like kids, like actual
uni students. Yep. So with the 4 years and the postgraduate, by the end of the postgraduate, your expectations are the same as by the end of a 4-year course.
Yeah, it's rough.
So obviously you've got to... The pace that postgraduate moves at for your first placement, it goes from half a day of small groups to next week,
you're teaching
half a day, 3 days a week, you're teaching the full class. It's a lot. I think you get more time to observe in the 4 years.
Yeah.
Could be a good and bad thing, because you could be observing things that you're not too keen on, could be observing things you're keen on.
Also, I think that degree could have been cut into 2.5 years or 3.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you like to learn as well. I get itchy feet. I get bored quite often. So I'm kind of like, the fast pace works for me, because I'm kind of like, I want to learn this and I want to go do it. Whereas if you're in the 4-year course and you've got a teacher who's willing to say, do you know what, you're ready, like give it a go.
Yeah,
that's a huge compliment as well. A huge compliment. If your teacher's saying that to you, it means they know that you can actually do this. Whereas you don't really have the luxury of the time on the postgraduate.
No, you don't.
In saying that, if you're finding it's too much on the postgraduate or in the 4 years, it is also okay to go to your teacher and say, do you know what, I feel like I'm not prepared for the lessons tomorrow or in 3 days' time, and I'd rather take the hit on not doing them than do them and do them badly and not do them justice. I would rather that as a teacher. I didn't watch someone who wasn't prepared.
And then you've got to teach
not that
again.
I've had to do that, but you know what I mean? Yeah, if you're watching that as a teacher, you think, right, I need to go over that again. Do you know, I'm not saying I never have to go over a concept again. Sometimes I do a lesson and I'm like, this was not what I had in my head. Yeah. We're going to need to do it again. But if I was watching a student who very clearly was not prepared and felt uncomfortable, I'd rather not put you through that. I'd rather be able to say to you, it's okay, because I can cover it. It's fine. That's what teachers are equipped to do as experienced teachers. I can cover it. Take the time to do what you need. Let's get back on track next week, or let's get back on track tomorrow, and we can talk about how I can support you, rather than you put yourself through that and think that was terrible.
Yeah, and your
I'm
confidence
unprepared, your confidence knocked.
Yeah.
Be honest with your mentor, because teachers have to have a bit of empathy and a bit of understanding. Not that long ago since we were there. So I would say everybody would more than likely say, you've done the right thing by coming. I mean,
she's the student teacher guru on TikTok.
Don't do it every week, Don't,
yeah, do that once maybe.
Don't do it every day and be like, if you're unprepared,
I don't want to do this lesson.
Because
okay, no
you want to if you're unprepared because you want to go out and like go to the discotecas, you know.
The discotheque.
And like, well, I don't know what these students are doing.
The discotheque.
I actually said the discotecas.
What is a discoteca?
A little bit of
Spanish.
I don't know.
Is that French?
I don't know.
Oh, you're so from Dundee.
I told you this one was going to be silly goose time. If you're
going out to the discotecas.
If you're not prepared because of that, that's a bit different. But I mean, if you're feeling overwhelmed with all your discoteca.
Right. You lost me at the discotheque, sorry.
If you are feeling overwhelmed rather than you're just unprepared because you chose to be unprepared,
totally
they're different. But like I said, not every day, but
yeah.
Be honest with yourself if you're feeling that way. I think in teaching you always have some sort of funny story. I know you've been itching to tell me one.
Yeah.
I don't have any, so let you take the wheel here and give us a laugh.
I've got quite a few, but
it's going to be really awkward if I don't laugh. So you've built this up. No. This better be good. Right. The people listening to this are looking for a good bit of laughter to start their day, and if you ruin it for them, they're never going to listen again.
Right, it's not that funny then. Chill out. It's mildly funny. I'm telling you this one because it's probably the only one that will get me into trouble. Yeah. I was doing a crit, or whatever you call it now, and
that's an observed lesson.
An observed lesson, yeah. And my third year placement. So third year, pretty confident, but it was PE, and it was primary one.
Oh,
primary one.
That's a terrible choice.
I know, but
were
you know
forced to do that? Like I say, forced as if you were held against your will, but
we had to get observed in PE for some reason. I don't know why.
That's brutal.
As if I would have chosen to do that, no chance. Anyway, I can't even remember what we're doing. We're doing fitness. That was it. We're doing fitness with primary one, and I was doing like a fitness class with them or something. Anyway,
he got Joe
I really got on with my tutor, so I wasn't nervous about it. We used to email about mountain climbing. I know, I was such a suck up. Anyway. She was like retiring and everything. She was just like so easy to get on with. And she was sitting at the back. The teacher was sitting at the back. I had them like in the gym hall. It was actually the lunch hall.
I cannot imagine you teaching primary one. Sorry, I'm just going to put that out there.
I'm not going to lie, I actually nailed it. Yeah. Very different. They were all sitting at desks and everything that wasn't play. It was, quite traditional. Okay. And so we're at our gym. I was in the middle of doing high kicks or something, star jumps. He was getting them to do this fitness class and hadn't thought about bringing certain things to the gym hall. And I got marked down in this in my crit as a kind of joke almost. And what happened was mid high kick or mid star jump or whatever it was we were doing, a boy came up to me, I'm not even joking, a bogey the size of his brain on his finger. Now, didn't say a single word to me, just pointed like that, with what can only be described as like a hot cross bun on the end of his finger. And I actually gasped. I'd never experienced that before. I was third year, never experienced it before, and didn't have any tissues or anything. So I couldn't send this child away.
No, they're too little.
This is too little. I couldn't send them up to the teacher at the back. They were howling, but I couldn't send them up to the teacher at the back because then that would be me using something. They're supposed to be invisible. You're not supposed to use them for anything. Couldn't send them to the tutor. So I had no idea what to do. Anyway, the story, that was kind of the funny part of the story, but the story ends, I had to send him to the dinner hall, into the kitchen. He went into the kitchen with this massive big bogey on the end of his finger. I'm not even joking. That thing literally looked like, do you know those old footballs, those old leather footballs, and they're slightly deflated? It had ribs and edges. It was just like, it was everything going on. Anyway,
different textures.
Yeah, it was bogging. This thing had a life of its own. It had a pulse.
There for a while.
Pulse. And I was like, it's a massive bogey. And I had to send them into the dinner. Ladies were howling as well.
I just can't deal with is snot.
Yeah. The bungee bogies.
Why is it luminous green?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh.
Or the ones that go, do you know those, remember those things you used to get, those slime things you used to get, and you used to, in a net? Do you remember them? And you used to squeeze them and they would come out. Do you ever hate it when you get bogies like that? And it's like a big bubble and it goes in and out.
Oh.
So that digressed quite quickly, but that's my funny story.
If you've ever wondered why we chose primary school over secondary school, or if you're debating it, if you don't like bogies, I would highly suggest you don't go with primary school, or because
other bodily fluids.
Bogies are a big one.
I don't really mind them too much because you can just tell a kid, go get a tissue. But sick is just not for me.
Oh no, I'd choose that over bogies every day.
Really? The smell?
100%.
The smell.
100%. No, I
can't.
think you can't look away from a bogey. You know, it's like
It's like a car crash.
is it called a bogey in England, or if we just totally isolate a big bogey? Like, I don't think that's an English word. I don't
must
know.
be.
Anyway, do I have? Actually, really, there's so many things. Well, I told this story once when I was doing one of my student teaching videos. I was doing my uni observed lesson and we're talking about volcanoes. This was primary 7, talking about how volcanoes are formed. They were really getting at like the plates, like everything. They were just, they were getting how this worked.
And you thought you were on top of the world, yeah?
I did. And I was like, this is going so well. And I can't remember how we got into the lava and the magma and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, and you're obviously a scientist,
and I'm like,
you're an
we're
expert.
talking about the questions, going over all that. And I had taught them for the kind of natural disasters topic. So we'd looked at different countries and like
she's giving it the build up.
disaster drills and everything they'd done. So they had a lot of knowledge in this.
Okay.
Someone puts their hand up. I'm like, great, let's build on that. You know that classic where you're like, I'm going to build on your knowledge. You're going to give me something. I'm going to say either, I don't know, let's find that out together. Or, let's discuss
That's interesting, yeah.
I like to blow bubbles in my cereal milk.
What?
When I
How
tell
do you
you, I was
respond
like,
to that?
okay, just gonna have to pull out the bag. I did tell you I can waffle, and I was like, oh, so kind of like how the inside of the volcano. And I just, and she's looking at me like,
you gotta move on.
No, doll, I was just telling you that I blow bubbles in my cereal milk. And then all I could think of was like all these kids sitting there with like a straw blowing bubbles in their cereal milk.
Yeah.
You know, not even.
Of course, it's got to be in an observed lesson.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, she clawed at that one to try and bring that back, but obviously on the inside, I'm like,
at least it wasn't a massive bogey in her cereal.
I'm gonna fail because of this bubbles in cereal milk, and I'm like sitting there thinking, is this what you've been thinking about this entire?
It's mortifying
time?
When that happens. Yeah, it's mortifying.
Or like you ask a question, it's crickets, and you're like, oh no.
Or you say, this is the worst, when you say to someone, when you say to the class, right, can anyone tell me what we learned yesterday about X?
No.
And no hands, and you're like, are you joking?
No, we can't.
I literally spent so long telling you
so
that.
We've obviously been working on multiplication for 2 months now. Can anyone tell me anything about it?
No.
Subtracting?
Yeah, tumbleweed. Yeah. Hate it.
Sure.
Anyway, that is a whistle-stop tour of our journey into teaching.
Plus little bit of ridiculous time at the end of that.
Do you know what? It's been a roller coaster, and in the next couple of years, who knows where it's going to go.
Life's
with the
a climb, but the view is great.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you captioned a video of that.
I did
last week.
But also, we don't really know where this is going to go with the podcast, with social media and stuff.
That is something
Doors
we get
are opening,
asked
and we're quite
as well.
excited about it.
We get asked that all the time about teaching and what it looks like for the future. I mean, if we weren't teachers, we would have nothing to talk about.
Yeah,
there goes the niche.
Yeah, exactly. We wouldn't have much content if we weren't in the classroom. But also the doors that it's opened. So, for example, we were speaking to Mr. Hunt from the front, who we might have on
to him,
as a guest
lovely
soon.
guy.
He was saying things like, oh yeah, I got taken over to Norway to do a keynote speech on some kind of technology and education. I was like, oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
Just from it's all connections, it's all who you meet, it's all who you know. And we are quite excited about the prospects of that kind of thing because it opens up different avenues.
And it's also the weirdest thing for us that, you know, Mr. P. Lee and Simon Hunt from the front are 2 people that we watched in our student teaching years and before that, and we were like, they're so great,
and they're just normal
so funny.
Guys,
and they're just the loveliest people, like so down to earth, so nice, and we're just sitting in the media lounge with these people like, at a global ed tech.
Who are we?
Who
do we think we are?
Who do I think I am? But anyway,
it just shows you, actually, not to get pure inspirational before this episode ends, but a lot of people are nervous about putting themselves out there. Not everyone has to put it online, but do you know what I mean? Like taking that step. Maybe it is leading something in your school or doing something for the first time that no one's ever done in your school. I remember feeling that when I was asked to lead STEM, and it was like, oh, this is a new thing, right? Okay. And actually, when you do take that first step, it is really scary. Like when we started posting online, it was absolutely nerve-wracking. We didn't know where it would go. But the opportunities it's opened up, you'd never really can fathom that's going to happen.
And I think something you worry about as well is people thinking that you're going on to act like you know everything.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've learned more from doing this podcast in this last year than I think I've probably. Obviously, I've probably learned like in the time of teaching. Like this has forced me to grow into somebody 100%. Better than I was before.
The research and the guests.
Yeah, we don't get everything perfect, of course not. In the classroom, you still have days where you're like, I was the grumpiest person all day, you know, but it's worth just trying something if you're not sure. And there's your little piece of inspiration.
Oh wow, that was...
Go get the day. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Inside Voices. Be sure to come back next week where we're going to be talking all about empowering student voice. And remember that in here, we use our inside voices.